Hey everyone, this is Jonathan Goss. I'm the author of the Heavenly Realms series of novels. I've never really done a video before, but I kind of wanted to do something a little different and a little cool today. Something I've been thinking about for a while. My favorite author of all time is Steven Pressfield. He's written a number of books. You probably would recognize The War of Art as being his most popular and most prolific. Everybody knows about this book by now. I remember reading it in probably, I don't know, I don't even know when this book came out. I think I read it in 2005 or 2006. Yeah, it came out in 2002. And this book really jump-started me and was just like a complete boot in my backside for my own creative endeavors. I had struggled for several years to get the Angel novels off the ground, and it really wasn't until I read The War of Art that kind of sparked the fire in me and motivated me. It was like a sort of motivational boot camp kind of thing. Anyways, tons of people know about it. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. If you've heard of The War of Art, you know of Steven Pressfield, and it's kind of his most famous work. However, I wanted to pay tribute to what I consider his best work. His motivational stuff, The War of Art, is great. Do the Work is great. No One Wants to Read Your Shit is really good. That's a really fun one. And then The Warrior Ethos is another really great one. However, I fell in love with his fiction. In fact, Steven Pressfield is on Instagram, and he does something kind of similar to this, so I'm keeping in tradition with just copying my favorite author. He does these little things where he sort of talks about inspirational books that he really likes, and I kind of wanted to do that too, except I wanted to pay homage to the man, the myth, the legend, Steven Pressfield, who I consider to be a real blessing, and a real godsend to me. He's done some series on or some videos on some of these little books. I think he's done some of them on the Greeks, but this is one that I've had for a while. It's just on Caesar. There's a whole library of these, and these books are not cheap. I don't remember what they retail for, but I remember I got this one when I worked in Borders back in 2002, and man, these little suckers were like 25 or $30. They were kind of expensive. They're probably cheaper now. Anyways, I want to tell you about my favorite Steven Pressfield books. When I was 17, my two older brothers read a book called Gates of Fire, which was about the Battle of Thermopylae. This was back in 1999. This was right after, or 2000. This is right after I started writing what would ultimately become Empyrean Falling, the first of the Heavenly Realms series. This book was like 20 years in the making, by the way. And anyways, I was a junior in high school, and my older brother, Nick Goss, who has his own series of books called The Travelers League, children's books, middle grade fiction. If you got like a 10-year-old, who's looking for something interesting, it's like Boy Scouts meets Harry Potter, but is like safe if you're Christian or conservative or religious. They're really cute. They're really cool books. You should check them out. I'll link him in here. But anyways, when I was 17, I came from a conservative Christian Southern background. And there are parts of that culture there are parts of like the Christ-like following culture that really I struggled with incorporating my more masculine, like warrior urges and instincts, because I was obsessed with Star Wars growing up. I loved Robin Hood and King Arthur and, the Civil War. And just warfare was always something that really just was percolating inside. Just bled through my veins. I cared about Terminator and G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Star Wars and all this other stuff. I went to the Carter House in Franklin probably 20 times as a kid. I was a dork. Never had a girlfriend growing up, and for very good reason. But anyways, when I was 17, my older brother let me borrow this book, Gates of Fire. This is one of the coolest books ever made. It is my absolute favorite novel of all time. There are a lot of books that I've read and a lot of books that I love. The Bible will always be my absolute most important book. In fact, if you can look behind me here, these right here, most of these, with maybe 3 exceptions, are the Bibles of my ancestors, all of which have passed away. But everyone from my mother, father, grandparents, great-grandparents, uncles, I kind of consider this like a shrine of a legacy. This is tradition. There's power in that. It's really cool because it not just because it ties you to your family and the memory of your family, but it ties you to God in a way that I think is tangible, and it's just really neat. It's powerful. Anyways, back to Gates of Fire. I read this book when I was 17, and it changed my life. And then like a year or two later, The 13th Warrior came out, and I think that's one of the most amazing movies for men to watch that has ever been made. It's not the most technically proficient. It came out right before Gladiator, but man, if you're into leadership, if you're into masculinity, if you're into the warrior ethos, if you're into like being a soldier and being a godly warrior, man, that's a cool movie. And right alongside it is this book. This is about the Battle of Thermopylae, and it is incredibly historically accurate, while still sort of painting a romanticized Arthurian sort of legend around the Spartans, the Lacedaemonians, you could say. That's what they called themselves. And it's just, the language in it is beautiful. Stephen Pressfield, he probably won't brag on himself, but I'll brag on him. He was a Marine in Vietnam. I don't think he was deployed, but I think I remember him writing in the War of Art that in his attempt to dodge the draft, he wound up volunteering for the Marines. Of course, because you can't escape who you are. You can't escape the warrior or the poet that's inside of you or whatever it is. Anyways, and then he went on to get a degree at Duke University in psychology. So on one hand, he's got the warrior thing going. On the other hand, he has the psychology thing going, and both of those come together in Gates of Fire. This is an absolutely beautiful book. The language is incredible. It's very poetic, very much harkens back to his inspiration, which was, Homer, the Homeric epics, the Iliad, the Odyssey, stuff like that. But I love leadership. I'm obsessed with the concept of leadership. If you read my books, you'll kind of pick up on that. But I've really fallen in love with this book more and more over the years, not just because I think it really taught me how to incorporate my warrior masculine identity as a man, but also it taught a lot about leadership. And there are a bunch of different things in here that I could read you, but I'll read you my favorite section, my favorite quote on leadership from this book, because I think it sums this up perfectly. This is from chapter 35, which would be, in the trade paperback version, it would be page 359. I think this is the best version to get, by the way. I've had the mass market, and the mass market's fine, but this is not my first. I probably had like 8 versions of this book over the years, or 8 copies. But anyways, here's a little excerpt from Gates of Fire about leadership. This is the narrator speaking to King Xerxes, or Emperor Xerxes, after the Battle of Thermopylae. He was the whole narrator. The narrator is a survivor of the battle, so he's recounting his time with Sparta and everything. It says, of what does the nature of kingship consist? What are its qualities in itself? What the qualities it inspires in those who attend it? These, if one may presume to divine the meditations of His Majesty's heart, are the questions which most preoccupy his own reason and reflection. Does His Majesty recall that moment upon the slope beyond the Narrows, after Leonidas had fallen, struck through with 6 lances, blinded beneath his helmet, staved in from the blow of a battle-axe, his left arm useless, with its splintered shield lashed to his shoulder, where he fell at last under the crush of the enemy? Can His Majesty recall that surge within the melee of slaughter when a corps of Spartans hurled themselves into the teeth of the vaunting foe and flung them back to retrieve the corpse of their king? I refer neither to the first time, nor the second or third, but the fourth, when there stood fewer than 100 of them, peers and knights and freed men, dueling an enemy massed in their thousands. I will tell His Majesty what a king is. A king does not abide within his tent, while his men bleed and die upon the field. A king does not dine while his men go hungry, nor sleep when they stand at watch upon the wall. A king does not command his men's loyalty through fear, nor purchase it with gold. He earns their love by the sweat of his own back and the pains he endures for their sake. That which comprises the harshest burden a king lifts first and sets down last. A king does not require service of those he leads, but provides it to them. He serves them, not they him. That's leadership. Leadership is not the lap of luxury. It is the burden of the mantle. You take up the mantle for your tribe, for your family, for your people, your friends, your platoon, whatever it is, and you go forth, and you are first to strike the enemy like Alexander the Great. You are first to lift up a stone and help build the Phocian wall like King Leonidas. That the sweat of your brow is what makes a leader, because the core tenet of leadership is sacrifice. Pick up this book. If you like my stuff, this is what inspired me. This is what made me fall in love with writing all over again, and what really kind of helped shape my vision of what I think a masculine sort of warrior type should be. As a corollary to that, I want to talk about actually what, in a weird way, maybe right alongside my favorite Steven Pressfield book. As much as I love Gates of Fire, I actually love this one a whole lot more, in a weird way. This is his follow-up called Tides of War, and it's a different book. People who know about Steven Pressfield probably know about this book. People who are Steven Pressfield fans probably know about this book. However, and especially if you're a fan of 300, if you thought 300 was cool, dude, you got to read this book. This thing's amazing. It blows 300 out of the water. However, I love this book. This book is so cool. It's about a mercenary who fought during the Peloponnesian War, what some people have referred to as a war like no other. It was the war between Sparta and Athens that took place after they had beaten, it took place after Thermopylae, after they had beaten Xerxes, and it was a brutal war. It was not a holy war. It wasn't a justified war. It was tough. But this book is very different. It's a lot darker. It's a lot more nebulous and gray in its morality. Like sometimes good guys are not so good guys, and other times they come back around. It's about mercenaries. So there you go. But there's there's some cool quotes, and I think I actually just turned to a random page and found an excerpt that I just thought was cool. I think this was during the Invasion of Syracuse. And it's narrated first person as well, but I just love this because Steven Pressfield is the master of telling an ordinary story in incredibly florid, beautiful language, and vivid. He's a really talented writer. I aspire. I think he's great. Anyways, let me read this to you real quick. Cavalry hit when we reached the plain. There were not many yet, as their main raced ahead to fortify the way against us. The column pressed on, in that infuriating spread and compress repetition of large bodies on the move. We came to a farm with a spring house. The site had been assaulted by the thousands before us. Nonetheless, men fought over the oozing clay, which they held in wads above their lips and squeezed like pomegranates for their juice. The column reached the second river at nightfall. The wells produced muddy soup. Each got a cup. We moved on. Men were melting by twos and threes into the brush, taking their chances on their own. Telamon fell in beside us. Telamon's a cool character, by the way. He's kind of mystical in all of Pressfield's books. He shows up a few times, and he's neat. He's sort of a Bagger Vance kind of thing. Anyways, it's neat. Telamon fell in beside us. Time to fold the flag. Would we join him? Athens, Lion replied, is our country. With respect, friends, screw your country. We laughed. He took our hands. He was no man for long farewells. 2 dawns later, the column came to a great plateau. A pair of ravines cut through at the southwest. There was no way around. The enemy held the heights. We must force it or never see Catania. Lion and I were incorporated into a company under a captain whose name we never learned, a garrulous fellow whose men clearly loved him. We got to the base of the track just past noon. Men were going up and dying. That was all there was to it. Our company was shunted beneath a hastily cobbled palisade. We would go up next. Behind us stretched the column. Syracuse cavalry made rushes at 100 points. You saw nothing for miles but their dust ascending from the scrub. The earth at our feet was cracked clay. I observed that we must get water or die. Lion indicated the beaten zone beyond our palisade, where the foe's missiles and stones rained. Step out there and solve your problems. 3 times our company went up the hill. The pass narrowed to a single wagon width. The enemy had sealed it with a wall. Behind it he was massed 20 across and 100 deep. Thousands more blanketed the cliff sides. They sent stones and javelins, even landslides, upon us. By post-noon they had the knack. They let the attackers advance to the wall, where the facing rocks compacted them into a body. Then they opened fire. Each assault company bore it in turn. When enough had gone down, or simply cracked, the unit fell back and another went up in rotation. The track had acquired a name: Blood River, though this was a misnomer, as all fluids soaked at once into the desiccated dirt. Exposed on the up track, we pressed ourselves like lizards against sheltering rocks or hunkered beneath makeshift palisades, burrowing into these clefts while the foe's stones and darts crashed upon us. You could see the shields of the fallen, great piles dragged back by their comrades, repulsed in subsequent assaults, or toppled or slid downslope on their own. Their oaken chassis had been bashed to splinters by the stones and boulders of the foe, signias and blazons effaced beneath a paste of dirt and blood. It's a cool book. I love this stuff. If you're a fan of my work, which I think there's probably 10 of you, so thank you, check out Stephen Pressfield's stuff. I think you would really enjoy it. I drew so much inspiration from him. He was kind enough back in the day to actually respond to my emails when I had questions. He's an incredibly generous writer, and I owe a big debt of gratitude to him because he really kind of gave a voice to something that was inside of me that didn't really have a voice. And there are tons of other men like that, like me out there, who have drawn inspiration from him over the years. So he's got an Instagram. He may have a YouTube channel or a Facebook. I don't really know. But man, just go on Amazon and check his stuff out. He's super cool. Or if you got a local brick and mortar bookshop, go in there and check out their stuff. Or get them to order stuff for you. You know, support your local bookstores. I mean, we all love Amazon. I sell my books through Amazon, but you know, there's something kind of cool about going into a bookstore still. So I hope Amazon doesn't hear me say that. They don't care. I don't sell enough to make it matter. But if you like my stuff, Empyrean Falling is the first one, and Grey Aegis is the second one. I think this is probably the best thing I've ever written, to be honest with you. I am really proud of this one. However, I just released the third one, Sturm and Drang, which is a prequel that takes place during the antediluvian age, around the time of Noah's flood. And I think this is probably the most literary of all of them I've made. And man, look at that cover. Like, isn't that cover cool? $5, dude, $200 for that cover. Isn't that wild? It's crazy. Thank you, Lord. Anyways, it's a cool book. I'm really proud of this one. I really am happy with how it turned out. I think it's got some cool stuff in it. It's got my speech on love, what I think love truly is, and I think it would be a lot of fun to read. I'm trying to think. There's something else I got to mention about this. When I wrote this, it was in 2007, and I wrote this whole book during the season of Lent, 40 days and 40 nights. 350 pages. I've since beefed it up a little bit since then, but that's insane. Like, you almost never have that moment in life. That's like a once in a lifetime thing where the muse or the Lord, is able to bless you with something like that. So I'm eternally grateful. And that's what happens when you sort of, I think, humble yourself before Christ and really kind of do something like observe Lent. I think that sort of thing goes a long way. It's worth trying, even if you're not a believer. I think something like that can really do wonders for you spiritually, because God is waiting. If you've read my books, you probably know that I'm a Christian. You probably, you might be a Christian yourself. I don't know. And I just now realized that I've been looking at myself the whole time and not at the lens, so that's really weird. I won't do that the next time. So, all right, cool. If you like my books, if you bought my books, if you don't mind, go on Amazon and leave a review. I have a Facebook page also, and I just started a Twitter account, so you can check out that stuff there if you want. But I love the support. Thank you to everyone who's bought my books. If you want signed copies, I can always send you a signed copy. That's always possible. Or if you leave a review, I usually will give a discount on a signed copy if you want. So, because I think exposure is probably my biggest enemy right now. I mean, aside from being a crappy writer. So, okay. Thank you. This has been a 20-minute video, and I'm sorry. But I hope you guys will go check out Steven Pressfield, because if you like my stuff, you're going to be blown away by him. He's awesome. So thank you, and God bless.